The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
While you're here, go ahead and sub up. Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Today, we find out what's new in Tennessee with the Tennessee Titans. And this is via YouTube subscriber Brandon123590. Got in, got the Titans up, and then there were two. So now we're down to two teams left on this segment. And so if you want to see either one of these teams be next, and I'm talking about the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons, simply be the first to leave a comment at the bottom of this video stating next in either the Falcons or the Saints. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk Tennessee Titans football. Not a lot of changes at the top, even though it was close. Mike Munchak was cleaning out his office, and they told him, hey, don't worry about it. Leave your stuff here. Albeit probably temporarily, leave your stuff here. We'll give you one more shot. So we'll talk about some of the changes in Tennessee. So we'll go in with the new with the Tennessee Titans. But of course, before you can get to what's new, you got to clean out the old. And so we'll go out with the old in Tennessee. So in order to go in with the new, out with the old, of course, I need not only the assistance of the big board you see behind me, but of course, my handy dandy pointer. I've got both, which means it's time to talk Tennessee Titans football. That was a lot of T's. So we go out with the old first in Tennessee, and all is the same at the top. So no need to go into coaches and changes there. Everything's the same. So we start with players. Quarterback Matthew Hasselbeck. Love this guy. Think he's a funny guy. He's a quarterback that gets it. He understands what he should be in this league, what he has been in this league, and what he is now in this league. He knows he's a backup. He knows exactly what his role is. And I thought he was really good in Tennessee. He could have been mad when he was benched in favor of Jake Locker, but he knew exactly what his role was in Tennessee. Hey, I'm the stopgap guy to hold this place and teach this rookie the ropes in the National Football League. I'm here to be a mentor of sorts, and when it's his turn, I'll just glide to the side and allow him to take his spot on center stage. And that's what Matt Hasselbeck did, and he had no problems doing it. And I thought he's the quintessential backup quarterback after your career as a veteran starter has come to an end. Once you assume the role of backup, you need to be like Matt Hasselbeck. I think he's the most ideal backup as a veteran in this league, and a guy that you can trust to put in for a 3, 4, 5 week stretch like the Titans did last season. You played your best football when Matt Hasselbeck assumed the role as veteran leader at the quarterback position, came in, you won 2 in a row, had a chance to win 3, you let the Colts come in, beat you at L.A.B Field in overtime, and your season went one direction, the Colts season went in a totally different direction. And so you were playing your best football under Matt Hasselbeck, hands down. And so you're going to miss Matt Hasselbeck because he's a quality backup quarterback in this league, one of the better ones in this league. And so him not being there anymore, and we know Jake Locker can and will get injured. Jake Locker is a very inconsistent player to this point in his career. You always want a guy that you trust behind him in case of an emergency. No more Matt Hasselbeck. You're going to have to find yourself a new backup quarterback. And again, I always talk about not devaluing the backup quarterback position because it is an important position on teams around this league, especially in a place like Tennessee. We'll talk about who will now assume the role of backup quarterback in Tennessee in a little bit. You look at running back Javon Ringer. This was a wasted draft pick a few years ago. You thought he would come in, offset Chris Johnson a little bit, and sure, if you had it your way, maybe a guy like Lindell White works out and a guy like Javon Ringer isn't necessary. But it didn't happen that way. Lindell White didn't work out. Javon Ringer comes in and you're thinking, okay, this is the change of pace guy we need. Not overly fast, but Chris Johnson is all the fast we need. This guy's going to be everything else. Solid ball carrier, change of pace, run in between the tackles. That was supposed to be Javon Ringer. You didn't get anything from him. And so that was a wasted pick in Tennessee. Nothing ever came of Javon Ringer's career in Tennessee, and he's no longer a Titan. You look at wide receiver Lavelle Hawkins, same exact thing. Wasted draft pick here. One was a 5th rounder, the other was a 4th, but same thing. A wasted draft pick. Lavelle Hawkins, and I don't know what the Patriots see because they obviously see something in Lavelle Hawkins. They went out and got him in free agency very early on as if this guy was a very well-known commodity in this league. No one knows Lavelle Hawkins, and for good reason. He hasn't done anything in Tennessee. He's had one solid season in Tennessee where he had over 40 grabs. That's it. This guy hasn't started for you. This guy hasn't made plays for you. This isn't a big-time receiver. He's never shown flashes to be that guy, so he's out in Tennessee as well. You look at tight end Jared Cook Jr. He's the direct opposite of those two players I just mentioned. He's the guy that I think is on the cusp of turning into someone that could be a superstar in this league. He's going into the prime of his career. He is a mismatch nightmare, and I thought this was a guy the Titans should have tried to hold on desperately, and they did. They thought about franchise tagging this guy. It was going to turn ugly. Jared Cook had threatened to take this to the NFLPA. They didn't want the mess that would have ensued had they slapped him with the franchise tag, and so Jared Cook is now a St. Louis Ram, and I think that this is one of those moves that you might regret down the road. We'll see. I mean, things happen for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. There's a reason why Jared Cook Jr. is no longer on your roster, but I tell you what, I like this guy a lot, and I think sky's the limit for Jared Cook Jr. in this league, and he should have been making plays and becoming a star in this league in Tennessee, not in St. Louis. You look at guard Leroy Harris, really good player when healthy. He came into the 2012 season banged up. He was dealing with a knee injury, and he started the first 8 games for you, and then he tore his ACL. He partially tore his ACL, missed the rest of the season, and that was it for him in Tennessee. He's now in Detroit. He's still rehabbing. He's looking to come back and be the guy that he was in Tennessee for a number of years. You look at offensive guard Deuce Latui. You signed him about week 2 last season after some of these injuries to your offensive line. Your offensive line was decimated by injury last year. Decimated by injury. I mean, it is amazing that Chris Johnson was able to get over 1,000 yards with the amount of injuries that you had to this offensive line last year. Only one starter on this team was able to play all 16 games. And going into the season, your offensive line looked one way. By the time the season was over, it was a totally different offensive line. And a guy like Deuce Latui, who wasn't even in the plans before the season started, all of a sudden by week 2, this guy was a fixture on this offensive line. You didn't have to turn to him until a little later into the season, but this guy wasn't even on your roster when the season started. And lo and behold, by season's end, this guy was on your offensive line. So, I mean, there are a lot of injuries, a lot of issues on this offensive line. And so Deuce Latui was a guy that filled in, gave you about 7 or 8 starts in 2012. And he was okay, but again, he's not a guy that you want on your football team. And so he's no longer on your roster. You look at offensive guard Kevin Matthews. There's a young guy that's versatile, can play center, can play guard. I thought he helped you in a lot of different areas last season. A lot of injuries. Kevin Matthews had to step in on numerous occasions to fill in at various spots on your offensive line. And so you're going to definitely miss a guy like Kevin Matthews. He was solid for you, not earth-shattering. He wasn't a guy that was going to move the needle one way or the other. But in this league, guys that can play multiple positions and help you with versatility always are welcome additions on your roster, and that's what Kevin Matthews was for you. He's now in Washington. You look at offensive guard Steve Hutchinson. Here's a longtime veteran in this league that was playing for the Tennessee Titans, has been solid throughout his career, but the writing was on the wall for Steve Hutchinson. He had an injury missed the rest of the season. He played about 10 games or so and then missed the rest of the season. And that was it for him. He decided, okay, enough's enough. I'm hanging it up. And so it was a solid career for Steve Hutchinson. At one point, this guy was an all-pro. And if his career would have been longer at that level, we would have probably been talking about a Hall of Fame player. But I don't think Steve Hutchinson was at the top of his game for long enough to be considered for the Hall of Fame. But this guy had a stellar career, and it ended in Tennessee in 2012. You look at center Fernando Velasco, and he was the last man standing on this offensive line. This offensive line was a war of attrition, and he was the only man that survived last season. The only one to play 16 games. He was your center, and I don't even know if you wanted this guy starting at center. He was breathing down the neck of the next man here, Eugene Amano, but I don't know if he was going to be the starter if Eugene Amano was healthy. Doesn't matter. Eugene Amano was not. Fernando Velasco stepped in. He did an adequate job. He's no longer on your football team, but he was the only man on this line to give you 16 starts a season ago. You look at center Eugene Amano, and the reason why Fernando Velasco gave you 16 starts was because Eugene Amano tore his pectoral muscle in camp last season, which spelled the end of his Tennessee Titans career. He did not play another game for the Titans, and he will not play another game for the Tennessee Titans. His career in Tennessee is over, and so he was solid for you for a number of years, but there's no more Eugene Amano in Tennessee. We move on to the defensive side of football and safety Jordan Babineau. This is a very solid safety that is around the football but doesn't make plays. Not a guy that's going to get you 3 or 4 interceptions. Not a guy that's going to force 3 or 4 fumbles. Just a guy that's going to be where he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be there, make a tackle, occasionally get in the fray when something's happening with the football, but generally speaking, not going to do much to help your team force turnovers. And so you look at Jordan Babineau and you say, hey, this guy is solid, but we can do better at the safety position. That's why he's no longer on your roster. You look at cornerback Ryan Mouton. Here's a very feisty 5'9" corner, a guy that you do not want to line up outside, but you stick him in the slot and he can play football. He's not afraid to tackle. He dealt with a injury after tearing his ACL, but he came back. He played solid for the Tennessee Titans. This is a solid acquisition by the Washington Redskins. We'll see if he's able to make that roster, but he's no longer on this Tennessee Titans roster. In 2013, you look at linebacker Gerald McGrath, and here's another guy, injured. Comes into the 2012 season looking to rebound, and he hurts his knee. Misses the whole entire season. That was it for him as well in Tennessee. And so this Titans team was ravaged by injuries. Now, I wasn't saying that Gerald McGrath was going to start at linebacker anyhow, and there was a good possibility that he wasn't going to start, but he was going to be a guy in the rotation, helping you on special teams. He never got that chance in 2012. He's no longer on your roster in 2013. You look at defensive end Jarius Wynn. Solid rotational depth defensive end. I think this is a very versatile defensive lineman. He's played in a 3-4 defense in Green Bay, got pressure on the quarterback. Played in a 4-3 defense in Tennessee, got pressure on the quarterback. Only played in 7 games, did not start, but still got 2 or 3 sacks on the season. And so that's a guy that can get to the quarterback in limited duty. And so he's going to be able to help someone. And I think Jarius Wynn is a guy that can get to the quarterback. He's no longer on your roster. You look at defensive tackle, Derek Marks. Here's a guy that I think the Titans really would have loved to held on to. You look at Derek Marks and his production when healthy. He's a guy that is getting better, I think, as the years progress. I think he's getting smarter as a football player. He's understanding angles and leverage. He's understanding how to use his strengths to his advantage. And I think he's getting better. I don't know if this is necessarily translating to him getting to the quarterback anymore, but I think as a run defender and a guy in the middle of your defense, I think Derek Marks is starting to understand what it takes to be effective in the run game, stopping ball carriers. And I really like his ascension in terms of him getting better as a football player. And he's rising up to the challenge. And I thought he should have been in Tennessee. I thought the Titans should have made more of a concerted effort to hold on to this guy. And he's going into the prime of his career. And here goes another one of those guys going into the prime of their career, not spending it with the team that drafted him in the Tennessee Titans. He's no longer on your roster. He's now in Jacksonville. And so you'll still be seeing this guy 2 times a year, just not in a Tennessee Titans uniform. So that's out with the old in Tennessee. We now move on to in with the new with these very Tennessee Titans. So now we move on to in with the new, and we're talking Tennessee Titans football. And you start at the top, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. You talked about Matt Hasselbeck not being in Tennessee any longer, and so you needed a guy that you could trust at the backup quarterback position, especially in Tennessee with the unknown that is Jake Locker. And so Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, is an ideal candidate to fill that void on this roster. Do you trust Ryan Fitzpatrick? I don't know. I don't know if I trust him for a 6-week stretch. I know he can play football in this league. I know that for a fact. But this guy is someone that will turn the football over. This guy is someone that is very inconsistent. And so, do I trust Ryan Fitzpatrick? Sure. I trust him, but to a certain extent. But I trusted Matt Hasselbeck more, but Ryan Fitzpatrick can play football in this league. He's proven it over and over again. I don't think he's a starter. I think he's exactly where he needs to be now as a backup. And I think he'll help you in that capacity. I just don't know if he'll help you the way Matt Hasselbeck helps you. And I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, to a certain degree, still thinks he's a starter in this league. So I don't know what the dynamic is there. He understands his role on this football team, but I don't know if he's going to accept it fully. We'll see. But he's your quarterback as a backup on this roster, and he will be your number 2 quarterback on this roster. And I look for Ryan Fitzpatrick at some point to play in 2013. You look at running back Sean Green. This is a very good complimentary piece to Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson ran his mouth in the offseason. He wanted to know why the Titans went out and got Sean Green and thinks he doesn't need a backup running back. That's hogwash. You need 2 running backs in this league, minimum. You need 2 of them. You got them now, one in Chris Johnson, the other in Sean Green. If Chris Johnson wants his career to end prematurely at 29, then you don't want a running back to back you up. If you want to get 330 carries every year and have your career be over by 29, then fine. Don't have a backup running back. But the Titans are smarter than that. They have invested a lot of money in Chris Johnson, and they realize in order to get the returns on that investment, we need a backup running back that can spell this guy and get short yardage, and that is going to be Sean Green. I think it's a perfect complement to what you already have in Chris Johnson. I love this acquisition. You look at running back Jalen Parmalee and running back Jackie Battle. This is really simple for me. This is pick one of these 2. I don't care which one. You're picking between and yuck. Jalen Parmalee is running back Jackie Battle is yuck. Pick one, put them on your roster. They'll be your 3rd running back. Have at it. You look at wide receiver Kevin Walter. Coming over from Houston, he was the number 2 receiver for years. But he wasn't really a number 2 receiver for years. So you're getting a guy that's solid. You know all too well. You've seen Kevin Walter for many, many years in Houston. However, I don't think you're going to ask him to do what the Texans were asking him to do. You're going to ask this guy to come in and spot duty, catch a couple of passes, and be on his way. And so in that capacity, I think Kevin Walter can help you tremendously. You already have a few receivers that you like on this roster. You already have Kenny Britt. You already have a young guy like Kendall Wright. You have Nate Washington still. And so you've got guys on this roster that can play football. You drafted Justin Hunter. So here's a guy in Kevin Walter that's just going to be around. If you need another guy to throw the football to, Kevin Walter will be available, and that's a solid acquisition for this football team. Look at tight end Delaney Walker. This was a huge pickup in the offseason, early on in free agency for the Tennessee Titans. You lose Jared Cook Jr., and he was a huge part of your offense, potentially an even bigger part moving forward. And so what is a quarterback's best friend after the running game? of course, the tight end. And you needed a guy that could not only stretch the field, but just do the little thing. Catch the 5-yard out on 3rd and 4. Get separation on 3rd and 7 and get a 9-yard gain. You need guys that can help you move the sticks. You also could use a guy that can run by defenders and create separation. Delaney Walker can do that. Now, does he have the best hands in the world? Absolutely not. But this guy can run. He's very athletic, and he can create separation, and I think he'll do just fine in this offense. Let's see if he lives up to this contract that he received in this offseason. He wants to be the guy. Now he is the guy in Tennessee. You look at offensive tackle Barry Richardson coming over from the St. Louis Rams. He's a guy that I think is probably going to end up starting for you at some point in 2013, if not right out of the gates. You have tackles in Rules and Stewart that you trust, that you like a lot, that have been stalwarts on this offensive line, but they're getting up there in age, and these are some guys that broke down on you a season ago, and so you need insurance. Barry Richardson is going to be that for you. Wouldn't surprise me one bit that this guy is starting at some point due to injuries on this offensive line in 2013. Look at offensive guard Chris Spencer. Here's a guy that you're bringing over for backup purposes only. He's a solid guy that has started in this league in multiple stops in Seattle, in Chicago. He can get it done, but I don't think at this point in his career you want this guy starting for you on a consistent basis. As a rotational depth guard, he's fine. As a starter, he's marginal. I think that's what his role is going to be on this team, is a backup. And I think in that capacity, he's a fine acquisition to your team. You look at offensive guard Andy Levitri. This was the prize right here. This was your big free agent fish. And you went after him aggressively, and you got your man early in free agency. And this one makes a difference. This is the difference between Chris Johnson rushing for 1,065 yards and Chris Johnson rushing for 1,567 yards. That's the difference Andy Levitri brings to your football team. He can block in the pass game, but he excels in mauling guys in the run game and opening up gaping holes. And so you did it in Buffalo for C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson. He's going to come over and do the same thing in Tennessee for Chris Johnson and Sean Green. This was a huge pickup because if you're going to get back to running the football the way you want to, you need guys up front that can move the line of scrimmage. And Andy Levitri is one of those guys that can erase the line of scrimmage and move it up 2 yards. And if you get guys like that in this league, you're going to win the battle up front in the trenches 9 times out of 10. This is a heck of a move by the Tennessee Titans, and it's going to prove huge dividends for the Titans in 2013 and moving forward. You look at offensive guard Robert Turner. I have a feeling that he has a chance to start at guard, but I also think he was brought over to man up the center position. He played center in St. Louis. He's versatile. He can play guard. He can play center. I wouldn't be surprised if he was out at guard as well, but I think with the addition of Schwenke in the draft, he's going to be a guy you groom to be the center of the future, but I'm not sure if he's going to be ready right off the bat. And so a guy like Robert Turner comes in and he can make the transition seamlessly to the center position. If not, he's a guy that can also play guard. Either way, the versatility definitely helps you here with a guy like Robert Turner. You look at safety, George Wilson. To me, he's the direct replacement for Jordan Babineau. And he does exactly the same thing as Jordan Babineau. He's probably a little bit more instinctive than Jordan Babineau is, but he doesn't make any more plays than Jordan Babineau does. They both don't make plays. They both are solid tacklers. They both are where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. But don't look for George Wilson to pick the ball off. Don't look for George Wilson to force fumbles. That's not in his DNA. He's a guy that's a solid safety that will do whatever you ask him to do except make plays. You get him from Buffalo, he's going to help you in the 2013 season. You look at safety Bernard Pollard. He's a difference maker. He's a guy that you put on the field and he changes the mentality of your defense. Guys want to play harder because of a guy like Bernard Pollard because he's giving it all he's got on every play. He's slamming down the hammer. Boom! And he's hitting guys across the middle. He's setting the tone for this defense. He's a guy that is crazy. And on your defense, you need a guy that's crazy. Well, you got one now. Bernard Pollard is crazy. And he's going out there and he's trying to take guys' head off. And when you see that kind of intensity, that kind of tenacity, it spreads like wildfire to the rest of your football team, especially on the defensive side of football. And this guy's going to bring an edge. Will it be borderline on teetering on a 15-yard penalty? Absolutely. But I tell you what, when this guy harnesses that energy and he brings that kind of controlled chaos to the football field, he's a dangerous, and I mean dangerous, man. You're going to love what you get out of Bernard Pollard when healthy, because he does throw his body around very recklessly. You get injured when you do that, but when he's healthy, he's a force at the safety position. You look at linebacker Moises Foku. This is a guy that you bring in for depth. He's not going to start. He's going to play special teams. In a pinch, he can get out there and give you some meaningful snaps, but you do not want Moises Foku starting for you, and he won't in Tennessee. There are too many young, talented linebackers in front of him for him to start, and he'll just be there in a backup capacity playing special teams. You look at defensive end Lopati Patuatua, and here's a big 6'8" defensive end that can stop the run, occasionally get pressure on the quarterback, but what you're bringing him in to do is stop the run. He's not a guy that you're looking for to get pressure on the quarterback. He can. You'd also like it if he just stood up and got his hands up in the passing lane. When you're 6'8", just standing up and putting your hands up makes it really hard for the quarterback to see what's going on. You're going to move this guy around. He'll play some defensive tackle. He'll play some defensive end. But I'm thinking you're going to put him in the middle of this defense, and you're going to allow him to try to get to the quarterback, collapse the pocket, put his hands up, and cause havoc in the middle of the defense. I like Lopati Patuatua, and I think he's going to be a solid acquisition to your football team. You look at defensive tackle Antonio Johnson. I didn't think he was a great fit for the new defensive scheme in Indianapolis. To me, he's a guy that needs to be at defensive tackle in a 4-3 defense, not at the nose tackle in a 3-4 defense. I don't think he's the guy that mentally is prepared to take on double teams. You stick him in the middle of a defense that's a 4-3 set, and I think he's perfect in that element. That's what he's going back to in Tennessee, and I think he's going to be fine. He's not going to be Senderick Marks, but he's going to be fine in a rotational depth capacity for the defense. Look at defensive tackle Sammy Lee Hill. I call him the serial killer because doesn't his name sound like a classic 1970s serial killer? Sammy Lee Hill. Sounds like he murdered 18 people in a 7-year stretch, doesn't it? But he didn't. He's a football player from the Detroit Lions that when the motor is running hot and this guy is fresh, he can give you some really good snaps. And I thought at times he was the guy that held this Detroit Lions defensive line intact when guys got injured. And so Sammy Lee Hill can come over, and if you keep this guy fresh, you're going to get a really good football player on the interior of your defense, especially stopping the run. And this guy, at his size, can occasionally get pressure on the quarterback as well. He'll make a solid addition to your football team. And so we go from in with the news there to any draft picks now in Tennessee. If you're looking for a breakdown of this 2013 draft of the Tennessee Titans, I will redirect you to the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series that I've done for every team in the National Football League, including the Tennessee Titans. So if you want a thorough breakdown of each and every single one of these players, 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series. So, offensive guard Chance Warmack in the first round just finally signed his deal in Tennessee, so he will be reporting to camp. You look at wide receiver Justin Hunter out of Tennessee in the second round. Cornerback Leedy Ray Wilson in the third round. Linebacker Xavier Gooden in the third round as well. Center Brian Schwenke in the fourth round. Defensive end LeVar Edwards in the fifth round. Cornerback Khalid Wooten in the sixth round. And rounding out your draft, safety Damian Stafford in the seventh round. So these are all guys that are either going to make the roster or have a legitimate shot at making the roster as draft picks. Now we go to guys who are just trying to scratch and claw and find a way to get onto this roster or any NFL roster. Of course, I'm talking about undrafted free agent rookies. Let's go down the list quickly and move on. Wide receiver Travis Harvey out of Florida A&M. Wide receiver Dontel Watkins out of Murray State. Wide receiver Rashad Ross out of Arizona State. Tight end Jack Doyle out of Western Kentucky. Offensive guard Oscar Johnson out of Louisiana Tech. Center Eloy Atkinson out of Texas El Paso. Defensive back Matt Pierce out of Valdosta State. Defensive back George Barker out of South Florida. Linebacker Jonathan Willard out of Clemson. Defensive end Nigel Nicholas out of Oklahoma State. Defensive tackle Stephon Charles out of Regina by way of Canada. And last but not least, rounding out the group, kicker Macon Bonani out of South Florida. So these are all undrafted free agent rookies. There are 13 in all looking to crack this roster. We'll see how they fare in this offseason. So we go from in with the new to any philosophical changes in Tennessee. So now we take a look at any philosophical changes in Tennessee, and we start on the offensive side of football because honestly, that's where it's at right now. If Mike Munchak is going to keep his job, this offense has to get it jump-started in 2013. If they don't, and the Titans look anything like they did a season ago, he will be fired in 2013. So, and I think Mike Munchak understands that there were a lot of moves. You saw all the changes that were made to this roster in 2013. Those are moves and acts of desperation. Hey, I don't have a lot of time left. I got to get it done right now. And he was told that. They told him. They called him into the office, and Bud Adams and company said, look, this is it. You don't have another shot after this. You don't get it done in 2013, you're out of here. And he knows that. And so that sense of urgency is definitely ringing around Tennessee right now. And offensively, your offensive coordinator, Dow Loggins, is a guy that came on board as an offensive coordinator. He was elevated to that status last season during the season. And I think that he's a guy that's going to try to make this offense a little bit more aggressive. But I tell you what, you're handcuffed. If you're the Titans, you're handcuffed right now because your offense is predicated on the success of Jake Locker. So it doesn't matter what Dowell Loggins wants to do. He has to make this offense fit around the strengths of Jake Locker, and that's bootlegs, getting outside the pocket, being mobile. And so he's a guy that studied under Norm Chow, under Mike Heimerdinger, under Sean Payton. And so these are all guys that have explosive offenses that can draw it up and have guys running wide open. But I don't know if this type of offense fits Jake Locker. I don't know if Jake Locker is the pocket passer you want him to be. I've seen Jake Locker. And I say this all the time, and you're probably tired of me saying this if you've been watching my videos about the Tennessee Titans. I've seen the best of Jake Locker in the National Football League. That first half against the Indianapolis Colts, I keep harping on this. That's the best of Jake Locker in the league to this point. That first half in 2012 on the road against the Indianapolis Colts is the best Jake Locker has played as a pure passer in the National Football League. Go watch the tape. 2012, regular season, Indianapolis Colts on the road. The second time these two teams met, Jake Locker was on fire, in fuego, in the first half of that game. Second half is exactly what he's been his whole entire career. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You don't know what you're getting from Jake Locker play to play, week to week, season to season. And until he has some type of consistency, he won't be a really good starter in this league. He won't live up to the draft status that he has right now. And so he has to find a way to be consistent. It'd be nice if he could stay healthy. That's number one. Every time you feel like you're making way and you're getting some traction with this guy, he gets injured. Injuries are a very easy and simple way to have you not be a starter in this league. If you can't stay on the field, then someone else ultimately is going to end up taking your spot. And the franchise is going to have to move on. We can't keep investing seasons and waiting for you to stay healthy. So Jake Locker has to stay healthy. That's number one. Number two, he's got to be more consistent, especially from the pocket. And yes, use your mobility. That's one of your strengths. If things break down and you don't like what you see, don't force it. Don't force the issue. Run. But you got to be more precise from the pocket. I think this guy is not accurate from the pocket. And that was one of the knocks coming out of college, being more accurate from the pocket. We could talk about Jake Locker all day. I'll save that discussion for another day. This offense is going to have to revolve around the running game. I don't think Jake Locker is ready to take the bull by the horns and be the leader of this offense quite yet. So I think this offense is going to be predicated on Chris Johnson and Sean Green pounding the football, playing sound defense, and we'll get to the defense here in a second, playing sound defense and keeping these games close. If you're a Titans fan, that's all you can ask for. Give me an opportunity in the fourth quarter to win the game. That's what any fan wants in the National Football League. Just give me a shot in the fourth quarter to have a chance to win the game. And if the Titans don't turn it over, I thought they turned it over way too often last season. The Titans don't turn it over. They run the football more effectively. And with the guys you brought in on this offensive line, it's going to be revamped. It's going to be a lot better. You should be able to run the football more effectively. I expect them to make the passing game a lot shorter. A lot of getting the ball out of Jake Locker's hands quickly, getting him comfortable in the pocket, 3-step drops, ball out of his hand, getting him some completions and getting him in the rhythm and flow of the game. I look for this offense to be a move the chains offense. Not a lot of deep shots down the field. They'll take them when they present themselves, but I expect them to just look to get 3 more downs. Let's get another first down, get 3 more downs so I can call 3 more plays, and let's see if we can matriculate the football down the field. I think that's what you have to do right now with Jake Locker. Run the football, pick up first downs, give yourself chances to call more plays. That's what I think this offense is going to be in 2013. You flip it over to the defensive side of football, and Jerry Gray has been holding it down as your defensive coordinator. I like what he's been doing. A lot of young, talented pieces on this defense, especially at linebacker. I think this linebacking core has the ability to be one of the better linebacking corpses in the National Football League. You need guys to get pressure on the quarterback, however. Your linebackers can be as good as they want, but if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback, you're going to leave the secondary out to dry. And so I think the Titans need to get pressure on the quarterback. And I don't know where it's going to come from because I don't think you have the guy on your team right now that can get you 10 sacks. And I don't know if you're going to be able to continue to get the sacks by committee thing going. There's been seasons where everyone's had 6.5 sacks, one guy's had 7, and you found a way to get 39 sacks on the season. That's fine if you can continue to do that, but I don't think you're going to be able to get guys to get you 6.5 sacks every season. Everyone's not going to have an opportunity to get to the quarterback like they did 2 seasons ago when it seemed like everyone on this defensive line, including the backups, had 3, 4, 6, 6.5 or 7 sacks. You got to find someone that can get to the quarterback consistently, that takes pressure off of everyone else, which gives them opportunities to win one-on-one matchups. I don't know if that guy exists on the roster right now. I don't think so, but we'll see. Maybe someone can step up like a Derek Morgan. You're waiting for this guy to step up. I don't know if he ever will, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Jerry Gray is going to find a way to keep you in ball games defensively. This offense is going to have to step up, and you're going to have to force turnovers. If you can get turnovers, find a way to put points on the board yourself or put the offense, breastfeed them. Give them the football at the 12-yard line in the red zone with an opportunity to put 7 on the board. If you can breastfeed this offense, they can take all the help they can get. And so I think the Tennessee Titans are going to be tough on defense. They got to be consistent on the offensive side of the football. And so that's what's new in Tennessee.
Like the content? Want more? Sub up.